Sounds okay, I guess. Sorry about the echo. That'll stop now. All right, and let's see if it's working everywhere. Let's test the chat next. If I send a test message, it shows up there, and this is my first time running the stream with YouTube. So let me see. This is all right, test showed up. Okay, so I can type there and it shows up to both windows at once. For example, I can go here and I can write, this is the quarterfinals, no, the semifinals game 2. And that should show up in both windows now. Okay, monitor my computer's health. All right, before we get started, the round starts in like 15 minutes, but we've got a lot to talk about and look at from yesterday. Before I get started, I would appreciate at some point if someone would send just a test message, one in YouTube and one in Twitch, and I want to see if those both show up in this OBS window for me. So I see one chat coming in from Twitch into the OBS chat window. It might allow me to just monitor one chat window instead of two, ideally, which would be fantastic. All right, thanks for the test, folks. Yeah, let's get into this tournament. Oh, and Pepper Chess typing yes in Twitch, yes in YouTube, and it looks like that went through. Okay, so I don't need to monitor. I can actually close this extra window I have with YouTube and just assume that everything's working over there, and then I'll be able to see their chats in one chat area. Thanks, Jan. Good to see you and welcome to the stream here. Oh, but the annoying thing is when I go to my when I make moves over here, the restream chat window disappears. That's not ideal. So much for that being useful. Over here, the restream chat window. All right, I'll leave both chats open for now. That'll just be the way it is for now. That's just how it's going to be for now. All right, I've set up my tiny little laptop screen. Here I am. No real monitor, no second monitor, no third monitor, no mouse. But we have Chess 960, so what is there to not be happy about other than pieces of the window falling off? A piece of the window doesn't smell good either. All right, let's check it out, folks. Let's get into some of the games here. So we're gonna go, we're gonna go to the knockout, and we're gonna go to the semifinals. We're gonna open up Noterbeck versus Magnus. We're gonna go here, and we're gonna go, whoops. try and get some semifinals. We're gonna open up Fabian. Actually, I should open up their last games. So we've got 10 or 15 minutes. We can just go over the last games, right? So let's get those games. All right, we're gonna try and get through the 2 games from the winner semifinals in 10 minutes. And okay, question from Nestor. Ding on form is a machine, but do you think he will be able to defend the title successfully? Right now, Nestor, it doesn't look at the moment like he could defend his title successfully against you this week. But, you know, what form he will be in the future, we can't predict at all right now. Right? So the short answer is, well, the shorter answer is we don't know right now. It's like you said, right? When he's at his best, he's 2,800 and he's, you know, second or third in the world to Magnus, along with Fabi, I would think, and maybe even Naka is at the same level as them right now. And when he's off form, as you can see, it's much lower than off form for any other world champion we've seen in a long time. So, yeah. Okay, here is game 1, which I didn't get to cover live yesterday. This is Noderbeck. Wait. This is Magnus versus Noderbeck. This one here is Aronian versus Fabi. Let's see if we can just have a quick look at these games before we get into today. Wow, Magnus started with G4 here in the first move. Just looking at the starting position, one of the first things to notice is that you've got hanging pawns here and here and here and here. That means it's a very, very awkward position. You've got a weird thing where the knights are next to the bishops and they're controlling the same color square as the bishop. So in the initial position, black is controlling very, very few light squares on the queen side, right? And white's controlling very, very few dark squares on the queen side. And over here, white's not controlling the light squares, but they are controlling the dark squares. And here, black's controlling the light squares and not the dark squares. It's a pretty weird starting position. In terms of which side you want to castle to, there's no strong preference in this position here. And there's probably some preference to move your F and C pawns and develop your bishops toward the center. But playing H3 or A3 and bringing the bishops out that way is perfectly acceptable in general. Here with an opposing bishop that's going to be attacking that square, it's not always going to be as obvious how you would play bishop H2, right? Like if you started with H3 because you decided you wanted your bishop that way and your opponent played C5, how are you ever going to engineer bishop H2? It's not obvious and it looks like you're already off to a bad start. So my first thought is the bishops are going to go this way towards the center. Abdul is telling us that either D4 or E4 is the best move here by a wide margin. To my mind, there are 3 moves that look intriguing here. F4, E4, and D4. F4, E4, and D4. E4, you can always follow up with F4. F4... F5, you'll have a harder time breaking the symmetry favorably. D4, D5, or F5, again, you'll have a harder time breaking the symmetry. Yeah, I'm with Abdul, actually. In this position, it looks like there's a decent chance that E4 is better than the other moves. It's something we're not really used to from normal chess, right? From normal chess or old chess, we kind of assume that E4 and D4 are more or less equivalent moves. I think very few people think that E4 or D4, that one of those moves is like more than 2% better than the other. Most people think it's just sort of a matter of, you know, taste and comfort and what positions you like or what opening prep you've done recently. I don't think there's a lot of people who really believe, like Fischer's best by test. I don't think a lot of people have that kind of an opinion anymore that one move is better than the other. So it might seem a bit weird to us that in certain chess 960 positions, there might be one move that's literally the best move and better than the other moves, and the other moves could be a tenth of a pawn less good. It's not going to be, you know, half a pawn less good or anything dramatic like that, but it might be something measurable or noticeable. So G4 is a very odd or surprising starting move from Magnus. It's not one of the 4 moves I would have most expected, honestly. It's not in the top 4 moves I would have guessed. Maybe not. If I kept looking past move 4, I don't know if I, you know, if someone asked me to rate, you know, the 19 possible first moves here, I don't know at what point I would think of G4. But he did it. And brings the knight. Wow, it's classical chess and he's playing a weird pawn sack on move 3. G4 was played to give a great square to the knight and to start blending light square and dark square control on the king side to some extent, right? Like the knight and pawn are now both controlling light squares, and then there's a dark square bishop on that side of the board. And yeah, it prevents black from playing an f5 move, which would be a normally pleasant move, controlling the center and expanding. The most obvious move for your pieces is this move, right? Because it improves 3 pieces. And so with his interesting move, Magnus stops his opponent from playing that most obvious move. Right? So in that sense, it makes sense. Hello, Okiki. Welcome to the show. And excited to have somebody from Nigeria here watching with us. What time of day is it in Nigeria? I'm in France now, where I think it's just about 1 p.m. or 13 o'clock, as they call it here. Is central control less important in 960? Generally, no, Cartier. It's going to be approximately just as important as in old chess. Because the reason central control matters is because there's some pieces that benefit a lot from being in the center, notably the knights. And the pieces move the same in chess 960 as in old chess. So yeah, controlling the center is still going to be good. Okay, so it's exactly the same time in Nigeria as here. Cool. All right, let's see a few moves and get a sense of how this game went. So what's Magnus's plan if black takes the pawn? He could play f4 or queen b4 in response, huh? Wow, black never takes. I can see now that if black takes and he plays f4, black can't stop bishop takes d4. But here, pawn takes f4, c5 was complicated slightly, I think. We're going to get into live games in about 2 minutes here, so we're not going to go deep on any of these calculations. But this was very, very interesting start from Magnus. Now black finally takes it after defending it with a full triangle. That's very illogical of Noderbeck to start this game. Very, very weird what he's done. He blocked in this bishop, which he didn't want to do by making this triangle, and then he didn't even leave and support the pawn here. If you want to spend all your time supporting this pawn, then it makes sense to play a6, bishop a7 with the bishop and not give up your central point. Wow, and now he's off on some tactical warpath again, right? Noderbeck is really looking to mix things up here. Game after game, he's playing like some violent moves. Now Magnus has very bad control of the dark squares temporarily, but Noderbeck's pawn structure is horrible. With the c pawn too far advanced, it means both b pawns and the d pawn are all weak. And Magnus is notably ahead in development. He's 2 pieces out, and it's his move. So he's 2.5 tempi up. He's probably winning already just looking at the elements of the position, I would guess. I mean, it is the bishop pair, but yeah, c3 and queen d2 were sort of candidate moves here. That move stops queen d2 and nails the dark squares. Hey, Eduardo, good question. I'm going to make a more full video on that subject very soon. I've already sort of made the outline and selected my examples and material and all that, but since it's taking me a while to get around to recording it, let me just say my #1 tip to overcome a bad phase in your chess, a plateau or a period where you're not enjoying it as much, or the studying's feeling like a grind, or you're not having as much fun at the board, or you're feeling stress, or what. There's all kinds of different reasons someone might have a bad phase, right? Is to reconnect with the best phase of your chess. So get back to what you liked most about chess. Look at the best games you played before, or go play a tournament again that was your favorite tournament from long ago. Like you played a tournament in some location and it's a great memory. Go back and play there again. Go back to playing a favorite opening, or hanging out with a chess friend that you used to hang out with. Like connect with one or more of your happier chess things. All right, Magnus fights for the dark squares. You'd expect the bishop to go into e3, but it doesn't. And I think either way, Magnus might be thinking of slipping out at g3 with his queen. Obviously, bishop takes h2 is a very dangerous pawn to grab when you're so behind on development as black. Magnus would play queen d2, going after d5 and controlling the dark squares, and he also has knight takes g7 to win back his pawn. So the bishop defends the pawn. That means he was scared of probably bishop e3, knight g7, move the queen, knight f5, re-challenging the bishop while eating a pawn. But probably bishop e3 is correct anyway. Just an instinct. Now that bishop's locked away, he's going to have to dig out with bishop f7, I think. He castles queenside. Okay. Knight comes out. Magnus covers all his dark squares with pawns. Prepares to perhaps castle kingside. Wow, very retreatative of him, right? Very passive here. Keeping the bishop from coming to c5. The live games are probably starting, so we're going to blaze through this and get to the live games, folks. My favorite book about the ending, Sasha, is Endgame Strategy by Shereshevsky. And that's a good book for players anywhere from like 1200 to master, really. So it's very nice. If pawn takes, then knight takes e6, followed by bishop f5 wins in exchange. So he holds his outpost here. Struggling to defend e3. Continuing to play weird expansion on the queen side. I don't understand. I do not understand this Magnus game here. 2 knights versus 2 bishops. This game we need a lot more time to digest, folks. I can't say that I understand much of it at all. Threatens checkmate. That's going to force black to trade their best rook. That we can understand at least. This endgame, the knights are as good as the bishops, but that Magnus is better is not immediately obvious. It's 4 pawns against 4 pawns. The black king is not good. And then black already resigned here. What is white even planning to do? Maybe knight e6, hitting the rook, then knight c7, and then rook a1. Maybe it's some kind of weird mating net. I don't know. That's a high-level game that deserves a much higher level analysis. But the first move has been played in Noterbeck versus Magnus. They haven't yet shown where the pieces are for this game, but they will shortly. So we're going to get into the live games today. If anyone has questions about the format, feel free to ask them. I've put some of the most obvious details or most salient details about the format down here. If you look below me, You'll see a bracket that shows the top players, the players who got knocked out, so to speak, in the first round. In other words, Dingley Ren, Firouzja Alireza, Gukesh, and Vincent Kamer. They're all still playing. They're not really like knocked out like they had to leave, which is nice because you don't want to only follow 1 game or 2 games towards the end of the tournament, right? So what's nice is they keep playing for 5th to 8th place, so there are more matches, so there are 4 games going, but I don't have room to show the bottom bracket or losers bracket or whatever at this point. So below me, I've got the bracket that shows how the players are doing so far. You can see that Magnus won the first game against Noterbeck and Levon won the first game against Fabiano. These are 2-game matches, as it says in the info all the way down at the bottom, right? 2-game KO matches, Chess 960, 40 moves in 90 minutes, 30 plus 30. That's 30 more minutes added and 30 seconds per move. So that tells us that it's a must-win situation today for Noterbeck and Fabi. They each have white, and they each need to win with white today to come back and tie the matches and force some tiebreakers today. Yes. And that's what we're here for. Let's see if... Oh, it's updated and showing us the real position, right, that Fabi has here. And taking a quick look at this position, we notice 2 bishops on the same side of the board. The bishops are the #1 thing I look at, folks, to get my first sense or assessment of a Fischer random position. And these bishops here, both on the right side, aiming at the left side, are telling me that ideally you would love to castle kingside. To castle kingside, you need to clear 5 pieces out of the way, which is not an easy thing to do. But if one of the players is able to do that, I tend to think that's advantageous. If the players aren't able to do it, which is a hard thing to do, then the position is going to very much favor the person who's able to get aggressively positioned and start attacking or threatening things, right? So like the first player to get this pawn up to c3 or c4 and their queen over to b3 and the opponent's queen not able to follow, let's say, that person is generally going to threaten some dangerous attacks and initiatives. So that's something to watch out for sure. There's no undefended pawns in this starting position. The weakest square in the starting position was b2 or b7, defended only by the king. That's like f2 and f7 in classical chess. It's a useful thing to look at the start of a game if there's any particular square that is a super weak square. I mean, just think of all the times that something happens on f7 in old chess, right? Now imagine you had no idea about any of the dangers to f7 and then you started playing old chess. Well, you'd be in great danger and not know about it, right? So in Chess 960, it's important to identify if there's a comparable square somewhere on the board. The prep time afforded to the players MC JGP is not enough to fully defeat the point, right? Like when you say kind of defeats the point, it like to 0.0001% defeats the point. I think they get like 10 to 15 minutes between when the position is announced and when they play, and they don't have access to computers during those 10 to 15 minutes. So Kritik is saying the same thing as me, 10 to 15 minutes. My understanding is that all the players, so first of all, they all have the same position each round, and then the next round a different position, right? So Noterbeck and Magnus have the same position as Fabi and Levon. The one resource that they're given is they're allowed to talk to each other. So all the players playing white go in like one corner of the room, and all the players playing black go in another corner of the room or another room, and then they talk together for 10 or 15 minutes, and they can figure out some 2 to 3 move variations to kick off the game together if they want to. But nothing that is going to ruin the game, in my opinion. Now, I think they could play without that, but the logic behind giving them 10 to 15 minutes to think about the position and no computer is that white doesn't need to sit and burn a bunch of time off their clock on the first move. And I think that that is I mean, I'm not convinced that has to be the best and only way to do it, but it's certainly like a reasonable way to do it. Like, it makes sense to let the white player have a few minutes before they start playing. If they don't have even a few minutes before playing, then it almost evens out being white or black in chess 960, in my opinion. Just the time you might have to spend on your first move as white could cancel out the first move. Depends. There are some positions that are pretty nice for white, and it'll still be good for you. The positions are totally randomized, and there are some positions that heavily favor white in 960. Yes, behold. Not like enough that you just win the game, but you know, where the advantage is more like 0.5 instead of 0.2, like in old chess, right? There's a variety. There's a range, which is fine. I think it's totally fine to sometimes have an advantage for white. And what else can we say about this? We've got a great question from Lucy Moody. Right now, Pumpkin, they're only eliminating 2. At this tournament, my understanding is they're using 958 of the 960 positions. The 2 that they're excluding are old chess, the normal starting position that we're all used to. That's one of the 960 positions. And they're excluding the position where you flip the king and queen. So the white king is on d1 and the white queen is on e1. Those are the 2 I think they're not using. Other than that, they're using everything, including positions that are somewhat favorable for white. And white has a decent score so far in this tournament, but you know, black has also won games. The most noticeable stat so far in terms of how things have shaken out is that there have been a lot of decisive results, period. Both white and black have been able to win games. Okay. To Lucy's question, I don't believe that there is necessarily a immortal game of 960. I don't think there's any position that dramatic flash Shivam. I don't think there's any position that's fully +1 for white. No. I think it's in the range of 0.5 to 0.7 are like the best positions probably. It's hard to say as well, Flash Shivam, because the computers are not good enough at chess 960, I think, yet to fully tell us immediately, are they? The chess.com computer here can't even tell whether or not the players can castle. So any of its variations that involve castling eventually would be spoiled until the players castle. You see what I mean? But here's the thing. Here's the thing to Lucy's question. This is, to my mind, the first time that strong players have played chess 960 at a classical time control. When people are playing Blitz or Rapid, they're not going to produce a game that's going to be at the level of like an immortal game. But from what I've been watching so far, Lucy, here was perhaps the coolest game we've seen so far. It was in the quarterfinals. Whoops. I'm just going to click through it real quick for you, and you tell me what you think. We're very early in the development of top players playing chess 960, right? So this game here, it is kind of like the equivalent of an Adolf Anderson or Paul Morphy kind of game. Okay? This is Levon Aronian versus Vincent Kamer from the quarterfinals 2 days ago. Kamer plays too aggressively with black, going e5. And Aronian, fantastically, Kamer has anticipated that white can hit back with e4, and after trades, it's close to equal. But white correctly, Levon Aronian, very, very subtle, realizes black is in a kind of weird zugzwang around about being prepared for e4. And so he just starts improving his position. And black struggles to improve their queen or rook because these two bishops are raining down on that side of the board. And black lashes out on the king side, which only makes things worse. These moves are very, very bad from Vincent over on the king side. Slowly winning like one useless pawn while not getting developed. And we get to this position, and boom! E4. Takes, rook takes. If black's rook takes,
There's queen g5 check. And then whichever way the king moves, queen takes g8, becomes back rank mate, right? You break up the possibility of the rook coming back to block the king. So black brought this rook over. Boom! Threatens checkmate on d7, continuing to leave the rook hanging. And then, oh, rook d6, and he resigned. If he takes with the rook, then he loses his queen after the trade on e8. Like this. If he takes with the pawn, then after bishop b6, king has to come here and rook c4 with checkmate. So this is not like like a Kasparov-Topalov or Kasparov-Shirov or Tal versus Hecht or Botvinnik-Capablanca. It's not like in 50 years it's not going to be the greatest game of chess 960 ever played or anything like that. But it's in the flavor style to me of some of the early Adolf Anderssen and Paul Morphy games. So I would say we've already had that this tournament, and there have been some other interesting games, but overall the level of play for now is a bit weaker, right? Because they're a little bit new to some of this stuff, right? So like in this game, Vincent Kamer obviously played somewhat weakly, but like the Count and Duke did, right? When they encountered Paul Morphy. Okay. So that's my first answer for now to Lucy's very good question. Let's pull up some more games here. So we've got the semifinals there, and if I want to see the 5th through 8th place, I have to select them over here. We can get Ali Reza versus Ding. And over here, we're going to get Gukesh versus Kamer. All right, so Gukesh lost with white yesterday, I believe. And in this game here, I think, how's Firouzja doing in this match? He won with black against Ding yesterday. Wow. So in the 5th to 8th place, it's must-win situations for Ding Liren and Gukesh with black. That is tough for them. I think that it just depends how many people are interested in Chess 960 MC, right? So once Chess 960 develops, if it does, right? But once it develops this is all a longer hypothetical, but I'm not going to say if in every sentence, right? Once Chess 960 develops a following, has books published about it, game collections, etc., that's how a game gets canonized, right? And eventually comes to have a lot of respect. First, you need a lot of followers who are interested. Then you need people writing books, the best games of chess, the best games of chess. And over years and years, people revisit and pick like the best games from the past and add some of the best games from now and revise and reanalyze and gradually cull the games that are the most interesting to them. Like the series we did in our podcast on the greatest games of chess history, where we picked 3 different time periods, picked out our favorite games, and then overall from all of that. That's like a revision that's happened thousands of times by thousands of chess fans over the last 150 years, right? And so it would take a while for Chess 960 to get to that point, but naturally it would do all of that if it continues, right? Like if human society continues for another 100 years without, wiping ourselves out, and if chess remains something we play, and if Chess 960 replaces older chess at the professional level and people start, valuing the commentary on these games and people want to watch videos about them and courses and read books and so forth, it all could and would happen eventually. I mean, these games are blatantly fantastic, I would say. Even though there's some first steps and some of the players are playing a little less evenly than others. But overall, I mean, it's a great start for Chess 960. So here we get d4, d5, Vincent against Gukesh, and then they bring out this knight g3, looking at maybe playing e4. Gukesh stops it, and after knight d3, he chooses not to play the more obvious knight to g6 move. But he blocks in that knight and commits to playing maybe f6 at some point. Here he's got the idea of playing bishop h6, which is going to limit how white can place their pawns in the center. That's a clever way to try and create some imbalance. Yeah, I think his bishop's going to h6, not g7. You're so used to a bishop going to g7, right? When you see someone play g3 or b3 in a game, you just assume it's going there. And I was thinking, like, but if he plays f5, that's not conducive to doing anything dynamic, and white can drop a knight on e5. Now he probably wants to play f6 to let the bishop and knight out through f7. But that doesn't go well with the bishop on g7. Like, you spend 2 moves putting your bishop here and then you block it. I think there's a good chance the bishop goes here, and then with like f6, knight f7, and trying to play e5. g6 is super committal, yeah. Could he also come with h5, h4? Yeah, you know, this knight doesn't have a lot of great options, so if he played h5, and white played h4 to stop him, he would have e6, and the queen just wins the pawn on h4. That's an important detail. I'm going to play a random move for white, just to show you this. Like here, you've just dropped a pawn in the opening, completely. Right? So you'd have to kind of allow h4 and just remaneuver the knight towards this side of the board. Knight e2 and so forth. It's not so bad for white, though. It's a bit of time. He could do it. Then we've got a very, very different opening here from Ali Reza. So I want to turn to this. The other 3 games are all d4 games, right? Man, Noterbeck and Magnus investing time at the start. This game here between Fabi and Levon is going to be more similar in some of its themes to the Kamer-Gukesh game, right? Because you see Fabi playing f3. Somebody said like a Ponziani, like he's threatening to set up the big pawn center. And black plays g6, allowing it because e4, bishop h6. So you just got to have a little alertness here in Chess 960, right? Boom, game over. So that prevents the e4 move. It commits to not bring out the knight, but it slows down the game by basically stopping e4 for quite a while, right? So now Fabi plays knight d3, and then you're going to get more of a closed maneuvering London / Torre / Gioco Pianissimo style of game, rather than a more semi-open game like a fantasy variation Caro if he gets to play e4, or anything in the French or Caro-Kann's branches of chess, right? Or Ponziani's center game, like the older e4, e5s where white manages d4. So in this sense, Levon successfully with this move g6 actually seems to have already directed Fabi back towards a maneuvering position and away from something more aggressive. And you see after knight d3 and knight d6, they're each doing a good job of controlling the squares that would allow the opponent to try and build an advantage in the opening, right? And we get g3 from Fabi as well, so he's looking at putting his bishop on h3 as well. And we may well get some symmetry with f3, f6, bishop h3, bishop h6 to start out here. Queen d2, rook e1, and castles queenside could be a good plan. Yes, although watch out for knight c4. Just bear it in mind. I want to see somebody castle kingside as well, Pumpkin. How bad would it be to have just blundered the exchange? f5 played, giving that e5 square. I don't like that from Levon. I slightly dislike that. It's like he just played a stonewall, which is just slightly not the best opening in chess, right? Okay, e4 and blundering the rook is best for white, say Hritik and Abdul Rahman. Okay, so e4, bishop h6, pawn takes, bishop takes, queen takes, c4. And now you get a position that feels a lot more like the position that Firouzja's got in the one game where he started with e4. So you're down in exchange. You've got the bishop pair, you've got the center. Neither player has much development yet. That this is good for white is not at all obvious. I think I don't know what Jedobra means, but hopefully Milora is agreeing with me. And saying something like they liked that. Players do not have to move the knight on h1 or h8 to castle. So black only has two more pieces to move before they could castle kingside in this position, although the bishop, you know, is not easily getting out of the way here. So, I mean, this is a very, very fresh kind of position. It is not obvious who's got a good position here. There might be a weird plan for white to go queen h6, threatening to go into f8, and if the knight moves off of e8, go into g7 and like trap the knight on h8. This is not the actual position, Pumpkin. This is what somebody asked me about. In the actual game, Fabi versus Levon, it doesn't look like there's going to be an early explosion. It looks like it's going to be a maneuvering game. Or at least that's the early style of the opening. But what I would say about this is a very hard thing to evaluate. It's fresh, it's new. Even a good player, I think, is not going to have a good sense of what the evaluation is here when they look at it. I would think. I mean, maybe there's some players like so phenomenally better than me that, you know, or this happens to be their specialty that they look at it and they can just tell and say and see. But to me, this is like super unobvious, and I would not think that it's better for white. I would think that it's like equal to risky. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, and I don't know where you got that comment from on Chess.com Critic, because I'm computer checking it now, and the computer doesn't like white's position either. Now, of course, the computer's very feeble at this, so its opinion doesn't mean much. But I wonder who was so confident that white was better here, because I wouldn't see it. Yeah, Emperor Harry, I have a YouTube window and a Twitch window open to read the two chats on the side of my tiny screen here, because the dockable window in OBS, which shows both chats in one window, which would be super helpful and useful to me, it automatically hides itself every time I click into my chessboard here to move pieces. And, you know, that's a non-negotiable. I have a non-negotiable. So yeah, so sorry, there's a text message I have to answer here about the kids. But yeah, like, what's the point of that chat window if you can't keep it open? Maybe it would behave differently on a PC. I'm on a Mac. Oh, it's so hard to type on phones for me. Pop-out chat is your friend, David. Yeah. All right. How would I write an opening book for this type of chess? Well, Blue Delph, probably somewhat similarly to how I would do it in normal chess, you know? I would start with a list of what I think are real chess principles, then maybe a discussion of some things that some people have sometimes called chess principles in the past that I don't think are actual chess principles, and discuss why not. Then talk about how principles clash and collide in the battle of ideas, and then just a bunch of examples interspersed with questions. So examples that I discuss and explain, and then a lot of exercises with questions. All right, let's get further. Why did I get a Mac now I can't use ChessBase? Yeah, I don't know exactly what I was thinking, MC. I was thinking that, one of the big reasons, MC, was that this computer weighs like 3 pounds and the PC I had before weighed like 8 pounds. And I was planning to sort of travel a bunch more, and I thought it would be somehow handy. Okay, let's see some of the real positions. So G3, F5, Knight HF2. I agree with this. This committal F5 from Levon. Wait a minute. He's allowing Bishop H6 here. He just lost his control of E3. So he's going to play Knight F4 in that case, and then bring the other knight here. I'm pretty sure that Fabi and Levon are both alert to Bishop H6, Bishop H3. It's possible, folks. It's possible, folks, that the players that a player absolutely blunders a tactical pattern in the first 10 moves of these games, because the patterns can be different than what they've seen before. For example, Ding yesterday lost a piece on move like 8 to a tactic that was just a little unusual, I guess. Yeah, I mean, just a new pattern. It was findable, but you know, just to say, it's totally possible for them to blunder something. But from what they've played so far this game, I think both of them have seen this Bishop H6 and Bishop H3 pattern in this position. So what Fabi is saying is that if Levon played here, he comes here, and this move is just terrible for black, right? Giving up dark squares, and this is the route his knight wants. So he wants to move this knight anyway and move this knight another time. That's sort of his plan anyway. Bishop H6 has been played, so we'll see if he plays Knight F4 quickly. F4 is legal, but I don't think that is at all what he's planning to do. Remember that Fabi's in a must-win situation, so like a double stonewall. I think Knight F4 is like clearly the plan, right? It helps this knight to keep moving. He does have to worry about G5 though. I mean, yeah, sometimes the opponent can lash out. Knight F4, G5. And then where do you go, right? Yeah, so in this variation here, MC is saying you could go here, 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 and then play this brilliant move to avoid messing up your pawn structure and bring the queen here. But this pawn structure is not amazing against this move, MC. Oh! And white is busted. Sorry, that's not a pawn structure detail. That was a little tactic. Little tactico. White can never take on e4 because after black takes back, there's a protected path through on f3. And white can never play queen f3 because of knight d2 check. And there's not really any piece that's going to cover d2 anytime in the near future. So the only way for white to threaten queen f3 would be like a3, king a2 or something, which is obviously going to be trash. So here, yeah, I mean, you'd have to go here and say the bishop pair is fine for this situation. Although it's not an amazing bishop pair position, is it? But look, black's e-pawn is as bad as an f-pawn. How to win from here is not obvious, but I guess... I think white's still much better here. I think white is still much better in this position. Black's bishop is trash. There is the bishop pair. There is the weak e-file. Yeah, I prefer white here considerably. I might be... Okay, he just played f4. No knight f4. And now knight hf7. And as you can see, it's symmetry. It's symmetry. You could even say that black has won a tempo because white played f3 and f4, so black has bishop h6 for free. But unless black plays g5, the bishops are going to be better out coming out this way than this way. So if white plays e3 and black brings the bishop back to f8 at some point, and white goes knight e5 and pushes c4, then white's actually going to be ahead in time instead of behind in time. So... yeah, so that's where they're at. Let's check. Is it really possible that Magnus and Noterbeck are playing this slowly? Holy moly. Sorry, Abdul, I'm going to have to move on from that game because I really want to see Alireza's opening, honestly. But I feel like we have to watch, Magnus as the #1 player in the world and Noterbeck as the player who finished first in the Rapids. Like, this is really the matchup I'm most excited to see today. But look at this time usage. Magnus plays f5 where everyone else played d5. Which is interesting because I think, the symmetrical structure is probably more conducive to trying to draw, and Magnus is up a game. So he must really think that f5 is the better move. My first instinct looking at this position also is that you want to play e4 and f4, not d4. So I'm surprised that 3 out of 4 people have started playing d4. I'm quite surprised by that. And Magnus, with his move f5, is saying, like, I think you guys are all making a mistake with d4. That's what he's saying here. I mean, he's literally saying everybody who played d4 is wrong. Everybody who answered d4, d5 is wrong. I think this is a case where he's probably right and just saying, like, you guys are all wrong. If he just wanted to keep it steady and play equally, I think d5 is normal. But he plays this, which I think is probably best. I think on the first move, e4 or f4 is the best move, letting out the bishops. Yeah, I mean, e4 looks like the best move. Just glancing at it, it requires a few calculations to check, and we'll see that on Alireza's board in a second. But yeah, I think d4 is not very good. f5, c4, and now Magnus plays, but this move is a shocker. I mean, where did he come up with that? Wowzer. I mean, it opens up the king. It gets the rook involved early on. It looks like a mess. I think e4, d5 was played in that game, Abdul. And very often you can play the Scandi in a position like this. Okay, very often we're getting ahead of ourselves on like different boards, but oh my god, they're far into their game. It was a Scandi. And very often you can play the Scandi if there's no knight that can attack the queen. It's that simple. Okay? Many positions where you don't have knight to c3 or e3, either move available, the Scandi is totally playable. It's very, very common. So, yeah, I think Firouzja and Ding at least played the first 2 moves well. They're also playing a million times faster than the other players. They're at move 14, while Fabi and Aronian at an average pace, I would say, are at move 6, 7, halfway as far as them. And Fabi and Noderbeck are at a snail's pace, like a third of the way to Fabi and a sixth of the way to Ding in speed. So c5. Preparing to attack this pawn and bother white on that square with knight d6 as well. The key question is really if you can't, get something out of that rook, right? If you can't get a little Tempolino somehow. Is there no Tempolino? Is there nothing hanging on black's position that we can take advantage of? Okay, I mean the critical line would probably be e4 or f4. Both pawn sacks. Right? Those would be the critical lines. This one you can maybe get your pawn back unless they really want to venture into rook e5, which I think should be terrible. I don't even know if I want to look at that. Maybe it's great. But to me, it's kind of insane. So we could get this position. This position looks mildly good for white. This position, I think, yeah, uncontrovertibly good for white. So, Master Toaster is saying Magnus had a different plan. And Hritik says as well. Okay, both of them heard the confession booth. So they're saying that Magnus planned to play e5 then. Ooh. These are the 2 moves I wanted to play, folks, right? From the start, right? E4 and f4. And now he's got both of them as black. In theory, that could be punishing. In practice, you really have to check your tactics to see if it's true. Because white has the moves knight g3, e4, f4, b4. I mean, a whole host of things to double check. f3. Knight d3. Yeah, how about knight d3? e4, h3, takes, check, here. Yeah, that's not enough. So no knight d3, so more like f3. Takes, 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 takes. Clear advantage for white, right? Bishop e6, holding everything together. Maybe it's nothing. Just a little, just a little structure, just a tiny little structure thing. We're actually down half a tempo as white in development. Maybe that's enough to make up for the structure. Dang. Well, that's hard to decide. I think, Joao, that they're moving a normal amount of pawns here for the start of a game. I mean, this is just like a time you are losing time. Well, I mean, they're putting like 2 pawns in the center and letting their bishops out. That's normal. I think up to 3 pawn moves is totally normal in chess to fight for the center, and there are plenty of examples of people playing more than 3 pawn moves in the opening. I mean, just think of like the A3 F3 line against the Nimzo Indian, right? White plays knight C3 and the knight gets traded. Other than that, they play like 6 pawn moves and then they play E4. And I mean, that's a little bit of an outlier, but this is still reasonable. Just 3. Just 3. After E4, E5, they would normally move pieces next. Yeah, but that's only because the King's Gambit's not that good, right? If the King's Gambit were good, you could get something like F4, D5, ED5, C6. That would be equivalent to this, right? I've got my little analysis board here, ready for the moment. You know, this turns out not to be the best opening, so it's not the most popular, but it's by, you know, 1/10 of a pawn. But some variation like this would be similar to, you know, what Magnus came up with here. And you know, there are Queen's Gambit variations that are like that. D4, D5, C4, DC4, E4, E5. Right, is also comparable to this. This is nothing extreme yet here. Just 3 moves, sort of central, fighting for center. It's still reasonable. So C5, he doesn't take it. He simply concedes E3. So this bishop's coming out here with H3. I mean, there's 3 pawns on his diagonal now, right? So he's not going to try and take on C5 and win a tempo off the rook. He's just going to play H3, bishop H2, knight G3, knight D3. He's got harmonious squares for all his pieces. And what's Magnus going to do about the bishop on H2? He's going to put a pawn on C5 to block it. That's 3 pawn moves each. They're still totally within reason here. Although the next move could be H3, which would be a 4th one. Okay, and now finally, let's go check out Firouzja versus Ding, shall we? Do they have the same number of pieces? They do. Okay. So we get a Scandi. And white tries to take over the center. Tries to stop the move E5 from black here. But bishop on G1 is pissed. How could you do that to me? White's just going to play without that bishop. Okay. Here I think Ding reacted very well. Very energetic approach to this position, which makes sense with white's bishop on G1. If you give time, white has a huge positional advantage, right? If you play E6 here, and bishop F7, and let white play knight G3, bishop D3, H3, bishop H2. Yeah, you could be much worse here as black, and Ding just strikes while the bishop's trapped on G1. I don't know if white had to take this. He could have also played E6, which it seems like white really would have to take then. Interesting that he did this. Yeah, not 91, Abdul, because 91, he's also just like slow in development, and black can play uncontested E5 with a slight advantage for black probably already. Okay, MC thinks that knight D6 would be strong for black. I see that black would put the knight on D6. That is a protected passer on D5. like, how strong is it for black if white goes knight g3, knight d6, knight e4? Or knight g3, knight d6, bishop d3, followed by knight f5 at some point. I guess black has knight f4 if we give them even a moment. Really? There's a total usually to it that it's a good structure for black? I thought it was sometimes playable, but depended very much on the pieces. Anyway, he takes, and after rook c6, very clear. Doesn't it look like e6 is much more forcing of white to trade? Because they can't let you take on d5 and isolate the pawn here. The bishop on g8 becomes really good. That's funny. White castles first, but it doesn't stop black from castling queenside. You know, if your king were here, you can't castle queenside once your opponent does. Freustl plays super, super simple. He's slightly worse. And this is where we're at. Wow. Yeah, he's slightly worse. He's got his work cut out for him to save this game still. Knight trapped on h1, bishop trapped on f1, because if it comes out, knight f4 for black is strong. I feel like he just has to play knight g3, fg3 to try to survive. Oh, it's definitely not good. Abdullah, it's fine for it to look like normal chess. That should happen sometimes. Now we're going to see what kind of... this is the first time Ding has had a good position in this entire tournament, I think. We're going to see if he's got some fire in him once he has a pleasant position. MC thinks FG isn't that big of a concession. Okay, that's cool. That's like the kind of thing where I'm too weak to know. I don't have that particular experience of saving a bunch of those endgames. I mean, it's obviously better for black visually, right? Pawns on the light squares on the queen side. Not a great light squared bishop. And then we make a pawn structure concession. I guess g4 is the other option. Yeah, g4 kicking the knight, and then the knight can come out to g3, but then you fixed more pawns on light squares on the queen side. And there's this f4 square forever. g4, knight d6, knight g3, knight f4. Yeah. Both moves are at least a small concession, but it seems like he's got to play one or the other of them, right? Oh, Abdul doesn't think g4 is good. It just feels that that's what Firouzja is headed towards. Okay, so this was very, very instructive game here. Very well played from Ding, actually. Hooray! Everyone's been waiting to hear that, right? Interesting. He really clearly announces, like, he's probably going to break with e5 quickly. The other interesting thing he could do here that white can't is he could castle... Oh, no, he can't castle queenside. The rook's in the way. Yeah, he would have to get that rook out. I was thinking he could move his king to c8 and rook to d8 and get something on the d file like a pin, right? No, he can't. He can't castle queenside here. He can only castle queenside with this rook. So this one needs to get out of the way. So, yeah, f6, e5, waking up his bishops. This makes sense. All white can get out of the queen is like a couple pawn moves in the center, which without well-placed pieces is not that useful. Was queen e1 a good try? It doesn't look great. Maybe just knight g3, developing the knight and waiting for the options for the bishops is more strong and flexible. But ever since he had to play knight f3, that looked like a bad sign to me, honestly. What he really needs to be able to play is like g3, Queen h1, bishop g2, trapping the queen. But his bishop on g1 is hanging too. And after queen takes g1, he can't trap the queen. You see what I mean? Like this would be the ideal. If this tactic worked, then this would be how you would get a position for white. Yeah, I don't think d4 is helping him. The pawn's just kind of sitting there hanging. Knight g3, e2, g3, bishop g2, f4. The thing is, it's slow. Black's going to play e5 themselves, right? Black's going to play e5 and f5 in a moment if we let them. Yeah, okay. Oh, I remember now. My instinct when I first saw this position, when Abdul asked me about the Scandi, my first instinct about this position is that knight g3 would be the best move here for white, not e takes d5. And the second move that might be good for white is f3. Right, like a fantasy caro, because now we've opened both of our bishops and we've conceded nothing yet. But the question is, on either of these moves, you know, what do we achieve if black goes e5? We can answer with d4 ourselves here, or we can play knight d3 with the idea of f6, f4. But knight d3, black should play knight g6 to control the counter. And then we don't have anything obvious. And black can play the same e5 move against f3. You know, it's a very similar feel. Yeah, I mean, d4 is okay, Hako. Like, there's no way it's bad for white, as you say, especially when he can settle for a draw. But it might be equal-ish, which is the big question to me, right? Is whether this is equal. Or if white has any edge of any kind here, right? Because if you trade on d8, rook d8, black gets the file first, your rooks are cut off, that seems bad. But if you go queen e4, then now your queen does give a tempo to one of these knight moves. But maybe that's fine. Maybe like the queen's just slightly better than the opponent's queen. You know, maybe you play like here or something. And, you know, maybe it's still very playable. Black's playing like queen e8, like in the game. I mean, certainly white can't be worse. Of course, this is very, very safe and solid. But if we're talking about options that move 2 or 3 for white, we're looking for an opening advantage, right? Especially because I thought that e4 would be potentially a good move for white in this starting position. Maybe f4 is a better first move. Because against d5, I prefer the Dutch/bird position here for either side, like d4, f5, like in the Magnus game. I prefer Magnus immediately. f4's been played by Noderbeck. They're playing so slowly. He spent like 15 minutes on that move. So this definitely could make sense. And also against f5, you've got the move knight g3, attacking it immediately, and it's hard for black to keep symmetry. Maybe there's this move. This could get intense. That counters the quick e4 idea. If I want to play for an edge, I'm thinking this move here. And if black takes on c4, we take on f5. That's pretty exciting. Behold, the reason I play knight d6 is because if I play here, then white gets to do this thing. Bishop d4, knight f7, e4. So they quickly get the second pawn push, and they get this sort of space advantage in the middle of the board. Right? So that's why I came up with the move knight d6 to... It's like in chess when you play knight f3 attacking e5, but really you want to play d4, right? e4, e5, knight f3. If black plays d6 or f6, white plays d4 with an advantage. You have to play the move with the knight where you're controlling the square as well as the pawn. It looks like white's going for the pawn. How about f4, f6? So then e4, e5, right? I have Hako, but never classical chess. The best one I ever played was at my own chess club. It was a weekend tournament. I think 4 rounds, game 60 with maybe like a 5-second increment. And I organized it at my own chess club. And that was the best Fischer Random tournament I've played, the slowest I've played, and the best level. I got to play against an expert and against Vinay, a grandmaster, a friend of mine. Yeah, that's like the highest quality Fischer Random chess that I've been able to play. Beyond that, I've played a couple blitz tournaments online that were qualifiers for Fischer Random this or that, or just like an occasional blitz tournament that was Fischer Random for some reason, which were okay. Yeah, it's so weird that we've had to wait forever for this. But Abdul, yeah, I mean, this is playable. You know, it works for all the black pieces. They all have squares to go to, right? Knight g6, knight d6 potentially. No obvious flaw with this. Yeah. Lots of playable options for black, honestly. But it would be a huge job if we wanted to somehow prove an advantage for white from the starting position of any Fischer Random starting position. It's not an easy thing to do, right? It's a vast and interesting game. Knight f6 from Maggie. I think it's not too early to say that they spent an hour collectively on the first 4 moves, and black's position should be fine. Like Magnus has neutralized white's opening advantage before it even started, basically. But this is going to be a game that's going to see some time pressure. They're playing with an hour and a half for 40 moves instead of 2 hours for 40 moves. Which is kind of like faster classical, like Magnus is kind of into. And he had a lot of influence on the tournament, so that might also be his influence. But Fischer Random chess is harder. Normally, by the time they've got half an hour off their clocks in classical chess, they would have 20 moves under their belt, right? So they now have an hour to play 36 moves. That's really quite fast. Less than 2 minutes per move already. Yeah, we're going to see time pressure in this game, I think. If Bobby were alive, would he play? Well, yeah, I mean, this would be a dream for him, I think, just as it is for me. They've got no increment until move 40, I think, and then the 30-second increment comes in along with an additional 30 minutes. But from here to move 40 is a really long ways for these two. Knight f3 from Noterbeck. And let's check in on the other matchup in the winner's bracket, the other top semifinal here. Fabi with white. So after f4, knight hf7, he just plunged ahead into e5. Black could just do the same, right? And does. Fabi trades once, which makes sense. And then, yeah. If black ever trades on e5, he wants to take this way, and he doesn't want to trade queens. He's in a must-win situation. Knight e5, d5, queen d1, rook d1. I mean, it's going to be less rich and interesting very quickly, right, Theo? If Fabi allows that, so he's going to avoid it with knight e5 and try and keep an edge. The idea here is to be the first one to come to the d file and to be the first one to take some queenside territory with the queen. And then, of course, he can generate some attacking chances over on that side of the board. And this bishop h6 is going to more and more look like a lost move for black, where the bishop's going to be much better here, right, on f1. And so white's going to have a notable advantage. Levon trades and plays a very risky move immediately with the pawn, looking to stop queen b4 and queen a5. So he's trying to keep Fabi's queen away from his king, and against rook d1, he's going to be happy to play queen b6. Right? But he's basically saying, like, no quiero que la dama me molesta. You see? Doesn't want to let her out. c4 is funny, but it's not good. Because Fabi's advantage is that this bishop could come out this way. But if this bishop can't come out, he doesn't want to play e3. So Levon has asked him something very, very tough with this move as well, actually. He's like stopping this bishop and saying, how do you get both bishops through this e2 pawn? Yeah. Fabi played relatively quickly, given how tricky that is. And we would expect rook d1 if he played something quickly. Yep. All right, so now the idea would be queen b6. And then what's he going to play? Like rook d7, preparing to castle queenside. Bishop e6, rook takes e7 is risky and controversial. Something like that is in the air. Queen b6, rook d7. And you're in such dangerous black that you naturally would look at something like bishop e6, rook e7, you know, rook d8 or bishop f8, something risky. Abdul thinks the bishop's going to c1. And there was also a suggestion, bishop e3, bishop d2, and then e3, and all your pieces can come out. Perfectly reasonable. I mean, if you just want to play it slow, that is a way to keep the game going for sure. And it's very playable. And rook d7 might fail, in which case, you know, in which case he certainly will not want to play it. But that's potentially a very interesting move here to try and generate something more. The other move that's potentially interesting after queen b6, in addition to rook d7, there's going to be this move queen c3, right? Covering b2, putting pressure on c5. And that's to restrict how black can untangle the king and rook. Does that make sense? Like, that's preventing rook d8. That's preventing the rook on a8 from coming out. And here you could do a much slower rook d2, castles queenside, and then show the power of your rooks. This could be... This is probably the second thing you would look at if rook d7 is bad. In my opinion. My thought process. My typical order of thought process, right? Like, first I'd look, can I just go rook d7, you know, castles queenside, queen d2, or rook e7, etc., right? But if this... Notice the queen's defending the bishop, right? If this giving up the d file is somehow not good, right? Queen c3 going after c5, bishop f8. Maybe you have to go bishop f8 first so you don't drop c5. Rook h7, rook d8. If this 2-pawn sack for black is brilliant, which I think there's like a 35% chance that this is like a brilliant double pawn sack for black and that white is bad here. Very, very good chance that this is bad for white. If that's the case, then the move I would look at here would be this queen c3 move. Now, black could untangle with rook c6, this MCJP, and then castle queenside because it's not through the attack. Right. And Pumpkin says just castle queenside somewhere. What about bishop e3, bishop e6, and h3 preparing g4? h3 preparing g4, this f5 pawn is not weak because black has e6, and you're waking up the bishop on h6 if you ever move your g-pawn. So g4 is not a good plan here, Hako, for those reasons. And if that doesn't make sense, feel free to, ask me to explain it further. Yeah, bishop e3. Oh, black's bishop's already on e6. Still, g4, you're breaking open a file that your rooks are not on in an area of the board where you're not stronger, and you're attacking a point on f5 that's very strong for black. So it's just not a logical plan. Yeah. Like what white has in this position that black doesn't is the d file. So it's logical to look in that direction for something. And the other thing that's logical to do is to figure out what you want to do about this bishop. And your plan doesn't do that either, right? Bishop e3, h3, g4 doesn't create a square for the bishop on f1. The bishop e3 to d2, e3 bishop out plan does do something about the bishop. It's not pushing for as big an advantage. It's not very dynamic or ambitious, but it's solving our problem. We have to either like push with our advantage or solve our problem. But was queen b6 played? Queen e8 was played. Passive choice. I guess he feared rook d7, honestly. The only reason you wouldn't want to play queen b6, I think, would be a fear of rook d7. Because you even let the white queen into a5 here, right? I mean... Queen a5 more or less forces you to play b6 as black. I mean, we could do more calculation, but the basic issue is white's threatening bishop takes c5. Bishop c4 activates the bishop, but it probably doesn't stop this primary threat of bishop takes c5. I'll just put it on the board so folks can see it. Like, we're threatening to take, and if black tries to tactic, then it's unlikely this works out for black. Because this is the theme. So queen e8's been played, and if Fabi goes queen a5, I would expect b6, and then I would expect queen a6, and that's keeping the rook on a8 trapped for a while, right? Feels a little uncomfortable. You can come deal with this queen by bringing your queen over, but you're going to give up rook d7 at some point as you do that. I mean, I guess, this move is desirable positionally against the bishop, right? So that white really has to deal with the bishop stuck in that area problem. I would expect white to play e3 and bring the bishop out quickly to the weak light squares and just concede that this bishop's going to have to go f2 e1 eventually. But right now it's so unimportant that I would bring this bishop out faster rather than doing one of these bishop e3 to d2 maneuvers. Right? So here, here, here. And if we trade in rook d7, there's rook c7. But I think just here is the right move now, right? Because black is so crunched with their rooks, right? And you've got rook d7 threatened. You've got bishop a6 threatened. You've got bishop b5 threatened, just owning black on the light squares. My instinct is black's already lost here, and we need a different plan. So against queen a5, let's say queen c6, defending the pawn that way. Oh, bishop takes c5 doesn't work anymore. I wanted it to. Yeah. So my calculation is that bishop takes c5 doesn't work here. So my thought would be rook d2. And we're just trying to castle queenside. And we'll threaten rook d7, bishop e6, we'll deal with it. But, you know, we'll have two rooks on this open file. I'm just thinking that something may come from it at some point. All right. I wish there were a move more impactful than this one, but that's what I see for the moment. Okay, so this is their position. Magnus and Abdusatov are going to have to start playing at some point, right? G6. This game could see kingside castling at some point, right? Noterbeck's bishop on G1 is pretty bad. I mean, in locked positions, most bishops are bad, so it's fair to point that out, but his bishop on G1 is worse than the other three bishops. How awesome is this? Yeah. Fallujah. Let's see if that game has been more decided. G4. Abdul felt him coming. Knight d6. I predicted that move. Knight f4. I predicted that move. Here they are. This is the position that I anticipated. 20 minutes ago when we last saw this game. The Magnus game yesterday, incredible f6 enjoyer. I haven't had enough time to process it properly yet, but I understood that the game was above my surface level attempts at understanding it. It's a great one. It's a great one to work through and learn something from. Very interesting pawn structure and handling of two knights versus two bishops. And yeah, he started with G4. Behold, he did. Yeah, I think we're ready to look at the Kamer game. Have they been playing really slowly? Oh no, there's an update. Okay. F4. I don't like F4. H5. Somebody said Gukesh might play this way back when we were looking at this position. Dang, Abdul has a profile on Ali Reza. You planning to play him sometime soon, Abdul? that's good to keep a profile of your competitors in mind. Gukesh is envisioning playing e5 at some point this game for sure. But why h4? Well, h4 now because finally black doesn't have e6 winning the h-pawn. But that suggests that Kamer was afraid that Gukesh would play h4, and Gukesh never did. Maybe he should have. I mean, especially after c3, this knight, when it goes to e2, it's now got no other square to go to for a while. So it might have made sense to grab that extra space right on that move. Okay, f6, h4, queen e8, bishop h2. I don't think the arbiters step in on an illegal move unless the players claim it. It should be like in normal chess. It's like your responsibility. Whoa! And here he comes on the other side grabbing space as well. Okay, someone said they didn't understand anything about what's going on. Well, Gukesh is thinking about trying to play the move e5, but Kamer has set up the knight on d3 and bishop on h2, so it's looking a little bit hard to play e5. And Gukesh gains space on the queen side. a5, a4 makes his rook better and gives him more of like an outpost for his knight on c4. He's trying to take a little bit advantage of this c3 move, which makes b3 less good for white to move too many pawns, so he can come here. If white goes knight c5, by comparison, he can kick the knight out with b6 and leave his c-pawn on c7, sheltering his king from this diagonal. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think a5, a4 could let the black knight come live on c4. And that might help black to play e5 at some point, as well as putting pressure on white's king, right? You could go knight c4, queen b5. So it's, yeah, aggressive. Yeah, if white moves the queen, they can run away from this. That's true. They still could. So if Gukesh played like a4, queen c2, knight c4, white could castle all the way to the king side. The thing is, like, who's defending this pawn against knight c4? Yeah, white's pawn structure is not super here. Not super. But Gukesh has not yet sorted out these pieces. He's playing with fire a little bit here, being a little bit aggressive with his play. No, it's a good suggestion as well as the rules, Oliert. So it's a very important point and question. White can castle kingside if the queen moves to c2, d2, b3, or even h1. White could play queen h1 and then do it. The main idea, Haka, was knight f7, e5. And on his last move here, he chose to play a5 instead, right? This would have been the simpler move, knight f7, bishop e2, e5. And we're not sure why he didn't play knight f7. That's like the much more straightforward, obvious, or likely move. But instead he played a5, so we have to wait to see. Does he now switch back to knight f7, or does he keep going a4? Does he throw in knight c4 here? Knight c4, maybe white plays e4. Yeah, maybe against knight c4, white pushes e4. Let's just look at something for fun. So bear in mind, black's not threatening queen b2 checkmate. But they are threatening checkmate anyway. They're threatening knight a3 checkmate. So, so queen c2 would be very bad here. Also queen b3 loses to knight d2. Maybe a4, so the rook covers a3. Yeah, a4 deals with this with a tempo. Okay, Smurfette, I like that. We're going to put it on the board. That's so nice. We just have to put it on the board. We can gratuitously sack the queen just because it paints a beautiful, beautiful picture. And this is the kind of weird position that you're not used to in old chess, but this can happen in 960. Oh yeah, that would be a smothered mate for sure. The king is surrounded almost entirely by his own pieces and an enemy knight. Oh, because c2 is covered by the knight, is it still smothered? To me, it's still smothered, but I guess you're right, Olirt. It could be a touch of taste involved in deciding that. I'm in Granville, Pablo, where Carnaval just finished last night. It is one knight doing all the work by itself. Semi-smothered. Uncastled king smothered mated, yeah. Okay, so they're thinking here on bishop e2. Let's get back to premium matchup. Knight f7. g4. Holy cannoli! Now Magnus concedes being down a full tempo, this e3 move, saying you're better off with the pawn on e7 so the bishop can come out than with the pawn supporting the center. So he's saying this was just a huge concession, this e3 move. And now he just wants to explode everything. I mean, he's allowing knight e5 too. That was a surprise blow by Magnus. You know, an incredible thing is I've been told that out of 12 classical games so far at this tournament, they started with Rapid on the first 2 days, right? Out of 12 classical games, they've got 9 decisive results and 3 draws. And of those 3 draws, in my own opinion, 2 of them are positions that were drawn because the player who won the previous game was in a 2-game knockout match and didn't bother winning the second game. 2 of the 3. I don't know for sure what happened with Noderbeck. Caruana for sure offered a draw in a completely winning position. Noderbeck played the game out, but played very weirdly, passing up various chances to win the game. Maybe he just misplayed it. But I would say the Fabi game, I mean, for sure. You know, we're getting an incredibly high percentage of wins here. Yeah, I haven't checked the numbers on the chess.com streams. Let's see what we've got. 850 people watching the French broadcast. Arabic, 30 people, that's less. German broadcast, 400. Spanish, 400. And Chess24, 7.1 thousand. Now, some of them are just inflated numbers, probably from chess.com's embeds and all that. But that's, you know, pretty reasonable numbers for a tournament. Well, Olier, I really think that, you know, non-super GMs can keep playing old chess. It's perfectly interesting for them. But for the top players, when we watch them play professional tournaments, it's much more interesting to watch it like this, right? So this, to me, is the solution at super GM level. And honestly, I wish it were the solution at IM and GM level as well, because it's more interesting to me to play this myself. What's the MC channel, Joao? Chess24 Spanish has 60 people. So there's chess.com Spanish and chess24 Spanish still? That seems sort of pointless. Magnus Carlsen has a channel. Oh. Captures. Now, my theory about this position here, was that if the kings stay on the queen side, then in positions like this, it's going to get very, very dangerous for both kings. That was my theory from like move 2 or 3 of this kind of game. Or even move 1, you know, when I was seeing some of these d4, d5s, I was thinking if the kings stay on the queen side, they're eventually going to be in grave danger, and you're going to get a very sharp game state. And right here, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling that the kings are in grave danger for Magnus and Noterbeck, and that the game's about to get super sharp. Now, when you say Magnus is streaming this himself, I mean, he must be busy playing. So what kind of a stream is there on his channel? Is there a commentator, or is there a video of the tournament hall, or what is it? He's streaming the official broadcast, a mirror of Chess24. Okay, so it's exactly the same thing that's on Chess24. It's just more people watching it. And Chess24, I saw that they had Peter Lecko on an earlier day. Oh, right now it looks like they've got Magnus in the confessional.
Up very, very quickly. The kings are going to be exposed. It's going to be hard for either side to castle. And I do feel that he's probably about to bamboozle me tactically somehow, but I don't really see it completely. So positionally, with my 2 lovely bishops, potentially, that especially my bishop on g8 could be much more active than his one on g1, since it's not impeded by a pawn. It feels to me that I have a very good position, so that's why I'm waiting for tactics, because there must be some kind of justification for his play.
Okay, so there we have Magnus, folks. To be honest, echoing every single thing I've said about his game, right? He saying that the main thing is he thinks this e3 move was a concession that's hurt this bishop, and so by being down that e6 tempo, he's actually ahead, and his bishop g8 can become very strong. And he's saying both kings are in huge danger, and it's going to be hard for either player to castle, and it's about to be tactical and complicated. Right? Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, Should he be working at the board instead of at the concessional or whatever it is?
Tricky position.
Now they've got Aronian in there. Wow, that's insane. That's a reason to watch the main broadcast instead of me. Knight e5 from Noterbeck. They're only at move 10. So they've got 30 moves to make in 43 and 45 minutes respectively. And it's super, super intense and dangerous here. Yeah, the confessionals are super cool. But if I were playing, I would never go to the confessional, you know? Unless there's some kind of contractual obligation around it. I mean, I'm all for trying to make the... Like, I understand that if you're a professional, and when I was a professional, I took very seriously the responsibility of trying to promote the game and provide value to any possible viewers. But while I'm playing a game, I'm thinking the whole time. I'm working on my opponent's time. I'm not going off to talk. Never, 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 never would that happen. So he only talks for 2 to 3 minutes and says his ideas. Nakamura did that a lot in Norway and did fine. Yeah, I understand that they've had these at several tournaments and these top players have done fine doing it. For me, like, yeah, I can't spare a moment. I need to be 100% focused. The move I'd like to play here for black is maybe Queen C7 or something. Yeah, Queen B6 is a cool move, and it was one of the first moves I thought of, but then I was worried about this requires a real calculation, behold. That's right, Hako. I used to never stand up at all, so like I would sit there for 6 hours. Now that I'm old, I'll get up maybe once every 2 hours and stretch my legs and then come back and keep working. I think like walking around every now and then, just a little bit, is good for your body and then for your brain as well, I guess. But in general, I think there's plenty to do during your opponent's time, so I wouldn't waste that time giving an interview during the game. So folks see that the issue here is that the knight is covering knight d7, and here, well, it looks like you have to play a move like knight takes, and then pawn takes, hits this piece, and it looks like black's losing a piece. Maybe there's something more tricky to it than that, but my concern is queen b6 basically just loses straight up to g5. Knight e4 can be played, but white's plan is probably to trade the knight and get this position, and then maybe like here, 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 something like that. Basically, the undefended queen on d8 is making it hard for us to take advantage of the central tension. I don't know what Fonzie or Sharks are. 960, this is the first time it's being played at classical time controls by the best players in the world. So this is, there's no like tradition behind this. This is groundbreaking. All right. But it's true, what Magnus might like to do here is get the rook out of a8 to c8 or d8. And the way to do that is to somehow move the queen somewhere. Oh, knight takes c4 might save that line, Hako. Yeah, that's really cool. GM Smurfette, I've heard the expression jumping the shark. I think I learned it from Danny Wrench. And he says it's like when a show loses the thread, so to speak. When you've got like a TV show and and suddenly they like lose their mind. It gets like really bad in a single moment or something like that. But I don't know where the expression comes from. I don't know who the shark is, if it's an actual shark or not, and I don't know who Fonzie is. Whatever show is involved, I grew up without a TV. You're correct about my age. I'm 42-ish. But I grew up without a television. That would be cool, Fando. I do really like the difference in these bishops. If I'm Magnus, I really want to keep that bishop on g1 bad, yeah. Happy days. It was going down the toilet. They got desperate. And a character named Fonzie jumped a shark. Meaning like there was a shark in the water and he jumped over the shark with water skis. That's, yeah. They've run out of good ideas. Yeah. Judging from the eval bar. Oh, you don't see the tactic, you see the eval bar. We don't see the eval bar. But we have an interesting tactic to look at, okay? It goes like this. Queen b6, g5, knight e5, gf6, knight takes c4, threatening mate, and mate. Everyone remember knight a3. So not a lot of choices. Bishop c4 or rook c4 basically are the only moves. Let's keep in mind that rook c4 is possible, but play this move. And then I had thought of bishop f6, but bishop b3 refutes that, right? White keeps the extra piece. So queen takes b6, as given by Hako, who came up with this line. Queen b6 threatens this mate, and black has time to recapture here. They may have to be careful how they recapture. Like this would be a bad way to recapture your piece. So we can't take anything for granted here. But pawn takes should hold the position together nicely for black with an extra pawn. And the important thing is, if queen d8, rook c8, but if not queen d8, black's big threat here is to castle queenside, killing white. If the rook on a8 develops to d8 here, defended by the king jumping to c8, then suddenly black's crushing. Because white has no similar prospect to get this rook out of a1. Right? So to some extent, if either player could get this rook into the game, they'd probably be winning. And barring that, somebody is going to be winning one way or another as well, because it's going to be complicated. You want to look out the window, head of dog? No, it's easy. Why do you want to look out the window? Can I look at rook c4? On which move? Right here? It is a little brighter outside than normal, yeah. You want to get a look at Granville? Does that work? There goes the mic, sorry. Sorry, I bet the rustling of the chords is a very loud, annoying sound. All right. And I like this comment here. I want to find it. Where was it? I smell desperation from IRL organized chess to stay relevant. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is nice here. Freezing cold though, Pumpkin the Cat. Like if you had a wide range of choices, you might want to live a little bit further south from here. But it's certainly, you know, coming from the west coast of the U.S., where there are basically no buildings older than 100 years old. It's interesting and incredible here. You live in Finland. Okay. Well, then you you might find it to be a nice, balmy 5 degrees here instead of whatever negative temperature you're dealing with. And in the summer, it is gorgeous. Yeah. For sure. I think that people watching a tournament here with 90% decisive games, anybody who watches this tournament is going to be a lot less interested in the tournaments that have 75 or 80% draws after they've seen this. I mean, this is really fun and exciting. All right, so Magnus has played a move. Before I reveal his move, should we try and guess it real quick? 25 where Hako is. Oh, man. Duck chess round robins with norms cranking out of the Charlotte Chess Center. Yeah, that sounds pretty shady. Fando, I hate to tell you, but Ding in bad shape is not a 2620 GM. It's shocking, but he's like 1500. I've never seen anything like it. I thought that a GM who was throwing up sick playing blitz would play better than this. It's really, really brutal. Really brutal. Like, if you gave Jesse the flu and food poisoning and then had him play a blitz game. I have no interest in farming Elo, nor in playing anyone when they're feeling bad or sick. I like playing people I like when they're feeling good, and then talking about the game with them afterwards. All right, who can predict Magnus's move right here? If he plays queen c7, then after cd5, he might just have to trade rooks and queens and stuff, right? Abdul's thinking of queen c7. That was on my list of moves. That queen b6 move was strangely possible, even though it felt terrible. If you go queen c7, cd5, castles queenside, rook c5, queen c5, queen c2. I mean, Magnus doesn't mind. He's up a game, and he doesn't mind simple solutions and endgame advantages. Maybe he'll just play queen c7. He was also seeming to hedge about like being afraid of getting outcalculated by Noterbeck. He traded. None of us guessed that. And knight e4. This is one of the first lines we looked at, but we didn't think it was any good. Unknown Cool Man predicted this? Okay, sorry, I didn't see you. I didn't see you call it. And now Magnus is thinking in this position. What? Exactly, Freddie. He doesn't want the trade because it helps White's bishop on g1 a bit. I thought, like you. Oh, Unknown Cool Man, you just predicted it in your head and have no proof. The way you said, yo, was like, how could I have missed what you said and, you know, disrespect you, not give you your props like that? D takes E4 looks a tiny bit worse. D takes E4, yeah. It doesn't seem like a move where you would think, okay, he's recaptured on E4. The knights will be missed. Yeah. All right. So what's he up to next? Queen C7, Bishop E5. Maybe he's just. Oh, it's Noterbeck's move. No, it's his move. Noterbeck played Bishop H2 quickly. Yeah. Okay. So this position, folks, we had it in analysis back here. We've got proof, yo. We had this position in analysis before. Oh no, bad proof. We played it like this with black trading on F7 instead of white, didn't we? So we didn't have exactly this position. Similar, but not exactly. Okay, so here we are. What's he gonna do? Queen C7? Cartier thinks, first person to call the game from Noterbeck. Cartier thinks we're going to get a tiebreak here. Oh, Cartier's talking about a different board. Ah, okay. I assumed it was right before us. So, yeah, we should go check in on that. Let's just give an assessment here and then move on. So, move on to some other things. So, we would expect something like Queen C7 from Magnus here, right? If E6, he can play Queen takes Bishop for now. If the queen moves to the second rank to defend the bishop, maybe he can play bishop takes e5. And if white plays a move like queen d4, just defending the e5 pawn, then he can get castled queenside and be in great shape. So I would think queen c7 in black is at least good. Queen b6, e6, could black castle queenside to get out of check? No. So queen b6, e6 would be very annoying for black's king. Adios Rangao, you're welcome. Let's go over to Fabi's game and see what he's been able to do here. Oh yeah, this game was so fascinating at this point. He played a4, not queen a5. Rook c7, then queen a5. What? He's given the what? And the pawn is just given to him? What did Levon do on the last three moves here? Nobody said it's a draw. The claim from Cartier was that Fabi was going to win. Fabi's in a must-win situation. Levon is up 1-0. And Cartier thinks that Fabi will win to force a tiebreak over here. Yeah. Yeah. And that's reasonable. I guess his point is if the bishop moves, he's got queen c2. So he's saying something, right? Levon is saying something. Okay, he's being tricky. He's being tricky. B4, B6. Wait, what is Fabi supposed to do? What is Fabi doing? Hang on. Liart says white has one move, rook d2. And then after queen c5? That hangs a bishop. I blundered. Okay. The lame-o bishop f2 or e3 is still good. So you allow queen c2 check, king a2, queen c4 check. That's at least a perpetual for black. Right? lot of sad rooks on A1 and A8. That's right, Pumpkin the Cat. And the position was very difficult. The position was very difficult to castle kingside in. But you can see that there was room to improve because somebody should have castled in this game. Somebody should have castled. If white had castled queenside here even, they could just play rook takes c8, rook takes c8, rook d8, keeping their bishop where it is. And then b6 comes in again, huh? So not. All right, Fabi's played something, and it's bishop e3. So he's headed to a3, according to our genius amigos. So it's going to go queen c2, king a2, queen c4, king a3, and he's just going to come around and bring that rook from a1 to c1 and say, thanks for taking on c2. Dang. Bishop e3 much better than bishop f2 because of trying to play rook c1, Abdul says. That makes sense. The pawn structure is very weird over there. And they're each kind of playing without that bishop for the moment. The h6 and the f1 bishops both being ignored for now. Absolutely, Pumpkin. See you later. Okay. So once we see that the king is safe on a3, and there's no bishop f8 because of rook takes f8, I was just starting to think, you know, check here, check here. What about bishop f8 and then e6? No, the rook can just capture the bishop. It's out to pasture, this bishop. Well, it starts to feel like black is dying because they can't get the rook a8 out, right? That's what it starts to feel like. Super complicated. Like if it were white's move next, it's not even clear what white would do next, right? Bishop on e6 is pinned, yeah. Yeah. Wow. If it were white's move, one thing they could do, I guess, would be king a2. And then queen c4, king a3 with the c-pawn still on the board. And that looks playable. The other thing white could do if they just got to move again, I mean, c3 wouldn't be terrible. But the bad moves would be castling queenside or b3. Those are the moves to avoid. And I don't think rook a3 is great either, taking away that square for the king. Rook a3, queen c2, king a2, queen c4, rook b3, yeah. Oh, Levon couldn't come up with an improving move to play, and he just went forward with capturing. I was sitting here first trying to think, what does white want to do? And the reason was then I was going to move along to, well, if that's what white wants to do, what can black do in the meantime to improve their position? Is there anything to do? And it's hard to come up with an improvement for black, honestly. Bishop on h6 can't move. b6, queen a6 just seems to tighten the noose. a6, bishop b6 doesn't feel like it's going to help black much. So I'm not sure exactly what black was wanting to do here. Yeah, black could go b6 now. b6 now, there might be bishop takes b6. I mean, there may be all kinds of things, but b6, bishop takes b6, a takes b6, rook takes c8 check. I'll put it on the board for you all. We got a checkmate over here. And otherwise, the king takes. We've got this. I guess that's not really decisive, is it? All I did was win a pawn in the fanciest possible way. That said, seems like white's winning. The pawns are going to cover the dark squares, and the queen and bishop are going to cover the light squares. So the idea is like bishop b5, king e6, queen g8, checkmate. Or if the king goes to e6 here, queen g8, king back to d7, bishop b5. So actually, it's basically checkmate here. Black would have to find a way to trade the rook for that bishop to keep the game going. So after bishop b6, we could throw in queen c4, check, king a3, but I don't see how that changes or refutes the combination on b6. You could go queen d5, queen h8, Olier, but it's opposite colored bishops with exposed kings, so it's much more important that we checkmate than that we grab a second pawn. So Abdul is saying rook d7 as the attempted defense here. Yeah, and then I guess white just brings out the bishop or something. Does e3 allow pawn takes b6? Yeah, I guess so. Have not cross. All right, we've got to move. King a2, b6 has been played. Okay, well, what we were looking at was relevant then, right? And let's check over to the players in brutal time trouble. Maggie Pants, queen c7, we got that right. Queen a4, we hadn't predicted further than that. Queen a4 prevents castle's queen side because of queen a7, or it may not prevent it, but you know, it tries to make it more complicated. b5 hits him with a big shot. Where does he go? Queen b4 or b3? Queen b3? But black's just gonna have d takes c4 in a second. Oh, did he miss this? Did he blunder b5 and lose in 14 moves? Noderbeck? Cross, I do think I have another really good chess wrap, but I just haven't had the time to do the final round of editing, but I think I've got a really good one eventually. It's not a 960, but Cartier says it is a blunder. b5, baby. Noderbeck. Crushed in 14 moves. Mainly by a single blunder. But I don't think his position was looking too hot here, was it? Because if you look at this position, Magnus is threatening the fairly simple move bishop takes e5 with an extra pawn. He's also threatening castle's queenside with an extra rook in the game. And Noderbeck's rook on c1 and queen on d1 are keeping him from getting the rook out, and he just can't get castled. It looks like he's lost, no matter what he does, honestly. So he's already lost the game, I think. So Magnus, very strong, actually, this continuation as predicted. As predicted. Who was the one person who predicted it? Gotta give the props to Unknown Cool Man. As predicted by Unknown Cool Man, this 95-94 just trading off all the knights to leave the weak pawn on e5 and activate this bishop, even though it lets that one out. Magnus just has more. And he's like winning. I think he's winning here. Yeah, I'm 42 cross online, or at least that's what we think here. In the stream, that's the best estimate we have of my age. So queen a4, boom. Oh, queen c2. You actually thought it was a bad sign when he played what you thought. Yeah, I didn't think it was very good either. There's some kind of problem, JK Heidegg, unfortunately, with this window that anytime I use the arrows to go through the moves like this, it wiggles the board. I'm really sorry. I don't know why chess.com's doing that today. It didn't seem to be doing it yesterday. Queen c2. So this defends the bishop. So if you take on c4, maybe he has e6, right? Although maybe then you just have bishop e5 anyway. Yeah. If it's causing people to start vomiting, I'll stop using the arrow keys. But since I don't have a mouse, it's very convenient for me to be able to go through the moves with the arrow keys. I'll have a mouse again tomorrow, by the way. I figured out how to fix my mouse, so that's the good news. All right, queen c2, looking for some kind of e6 thing. My mouse is at home. I mean, at my French home. Right now, I'm in this extra room at my landlord's house that they let me use as an office when it's available. Bishop e6 at a minimum. It's true there's no hurry to take on c4 because that pawn is currently sort of lined up to the queen by the rook, right? So that pawn's already dead. From that perspective, you could go bishop e5 just to take that pawn, right? And then take the other one next. You can also castle queenside and answer e6 with bishop e5 and get the second rook out. What's Noderbeck's dream now? His dream now is to lose 1 to 2 pawns, move this rook out to like d1 or e1 and castle queenside, or I don't know what he's going to do. Maybe b4 is his dream. b4, and then if the rook backs up, c5. Okay, so Magnus should respect the move b4 in my opinion. He should respect b4. Completely winning, but let's have some respect. If he takes on c4, white can play b4, and he won't be able to, I don't know which way he would take, right? But for example here, he wouldn't be able to take it, right? Because the rook would be hanging to these pieces. But he can just move his rook, and he's fine. If he goes bishop e5, queen e5, b4, is that a problem? A little bit. He's made a move. I just kind of want to guess it before I see what he played. I kind of want to guess it because I realize it's an interesting test. Yeah, d takes c4 will let the white queen go to e4, as somebody mentioned. I will GM Smurfette. Just a second. Yeah, Liard, I think b takes c4 makes sense. Played it. All right, now we'll go look at Smurfette's line. So Smurfette says after b5 that queen a3 is some kind of thing to try. What's the idea with this move, Smurfette? To maybe also land b4? But have the queen more active? I mean, we kind of assume that there's something winning for Magnus here against this move. You want to go e6 and on bishop e5 take it and take the rook. Right. Very trick. Very trick. So probably he would play dc4 there and then on e6 bishop e5 and the rook is now in communication with the center. Now obviously white doesn't have to go e6, but this is the more desirable capture anyway, opening up the bishop more and the rook on the d file when you castle queenside because white's rook, right? So we want the d file open. And the only reason we didn't do it in the game is because of queen e4, right? In the game continuation, he didn't take here because of here, I think. I'm sure black has a way against this move as well, but we can see that, I mean, we have bishop d5 and probably good for black, but, you know, he didn't want to give this central square to the queen and the pawn back, right? He wants to win a pawn, so he played here in the game. Queen c3 played defending e5, bishop e6 developing more, and now he never has to worry about calculating e6. And now he's going to play like rook c2 to castle queenside or something like that. Or maybe move the bishop to castle kingside if he still can. Okay, bishop e2 means he's castling kingside. That could really bamboozle Magnus, actually. Now he's just lost without 0 counterplay. Well, hold your horses. If he castles queenside, and he's just down 1 pawn and he's got this lever with b3 and Magnus's king is just out there, then who will actually be bamboozled? He's going to castle kingside. He's going to be the first player to achieve kingside castling today. Yeah, he's done it quickly. The game is still on. The game is still on. Magnus is going to go rook f8 to try and take pieces off the board maybe, and he's going to play rook f b1 and just gun for him. Or maybe rook f c1. But this is not going to be easy, in my opinion. I think Magnus squandered a big part of his advantage somewhere in the last 2 moves. Should we try and find out where it was? I mean, it's probably just this bishop e6 move, right? Lame move. Queen c3. What should he do here? I'm looking at h5. Just trying to ruin the other area for the white king to go, right? You could also do it with bishop e6, bishop e2, and then h5. It's kind of the same thing. White could take twice, but you get your pawn back on h3, so you're still up 1 pawn, and the point is you've wrecked that area, and where's the white king going, right? To get out of the way. Or, yes. Or castles queenside, and then bishop e2, rook f8, preventing castling and threatening rook f2. Yeah. I have this fear, Smurfette, like maybe Magnus didn't quite take it into account properly, but maybe he'll just play h5 right here. No, he still doesn't. Yeah, he got a little bit blindsided, I think, by Noterbeck's kingside castling, and now we've got a game again. So this move is trying to stop b3 because b3, cb3, and then a queen trade. Bear in mind, Magnus doesn't need to win this game because he's a game up in the match. So, like any endgame, he can go for it even if he's not confident that he can win it because he knows he won't lose it, at least. b6 was played. Did Fabi take it? No, he just crept. Oh, vicious. Vicious. He just wants to play rook c1. He's in no hurry. He's in no hurry. And folks, I guarantee you Fabi saw bishop b6, rook c8 as a combo. I mean, that's just staring you in the face here. So he prefers this. Against queen c4, he'll take. Remember that Fabi does have to win this game, right? So he's under some pressure. Because like here, this could be logical, but king c7, and you can't go win the game over here because of check. Maybe he needs to play b3 as a tempo here. And then if the rook goes to c6 or c7 or something, rook c1's winning. But rook c2, against rook c3, he would also play rook c1 winning. Oh, maybe that's, well, no cross. I really want to, I want to get out of bishop e6 check. so I can go collect this side of the board. Because I need to win somewhere, and I don't see where else I'm winning. So I have to do this, and I have to lose a full tempo. And then the king gets out. And then on rook d1, there's bishop b7, rook d7, check, king there. And we win the pawn. Okay. Okay. We can keep the bind a little bit longer here. But king b1, it's like a tempo, but how many tempi is it for the rook to get out then? No, I'm going here and here. Oh god, now my king is still badly placed, huh? And if I trade and take the e-pawn, I lose to bishop f8. Doesn't even seem fair, does it? He must have something strong planned in this endgame because Levon's having a long think, and he picked this over bishop b6. And, you know, yes, rook d6 provides some kind of defense, but I mean, that's a free pawn. There's lots of options here for what white plays next. There's no way this is bad for white, I have to say. Like, the simplest is I retreat the bishop, so my queen's on here, and I'm re-threatening rook c1, and I've won a pawn, right? King b1, king b2. Okay, you're right, Hako. That's probably the answer in this endgame. Levon just played a move. He played queen c6, so it's not going to come up. Bishop takes b6. Did I miss an important move with rook b7? Potentially, yeah. For me, it's just hard to imagine that with the rook trapped on a8 that this stuff isn't all somehow winning for white eventually. Here, what I'm preparing is like e5, e6, bishop e5. You know, and as well, from this position, I can play rook a3 next. I mean, I like taking the extra pawn, right? Okay, but he's played, I mean, Fabi's playing fantastically this week. Let's assume that his move is likely to be strong. Somebody mentioned, we'll get into what Levon played with queen c6 in a moment, but someone mentioned queen c4, rook c4 here, that I should be less shy about this tempo because I've got king b2. Here, though, we got a lot to justify here. Maybe we've trapped this rook. I think that rook's trapped, right? All right, so here white's winning one pawn after much effort. I doubt this position doesn't look better than the bishop takes b6 position to me. Does it? All right, so somebody says there's a perpetual in the bishop takes b6 line. Rook b7, I played bishop d4, and now queen b3, queen d1, queen b3, queen d1. Yeah. Fair enough. So maybe this rook b7 move. I have to move the bishop. I'm sure of that. Bishop d4 is the only square that doesn't get mated. Queen c5 Hako. Threatening rook c8 mate and the queen. Queen a4, king b1. The rook's covering d1 here because we didn't play bishop d4. And there's still the mate on c8. Oh, it's crushing. Yeah. Hako beat rook b7, folks. That's great. Not only are we up a pawn in this endgame, but I love this bishop on c5. It's helping to keep this bishop from ever getting out, right? It's really beautiful. And like we threaten to win this pawn. If the pawn ever moves, bishop d6 is too good. I mean, this piece is never coming back, I don't think. Why not bishop takes b6? What are we missing? I think, Hako, that bishop b6 and queen a6 are probably both good. My instincts, right? Now, the calculation will sometimes refute your instincts. But on instinct, I think both moves are good for white. Like, I think white's position is good enough to go for bishop takes b6. Only a takes b6 develops black's rook, which is the only thing where something could really, really go wrong strategically, right? Any variation where you go bishop b6 and then you retreat the bishop, like you spent some time and energy grabbing the pawn, but that rook on a8 is so bad, I believe you can get away with it. So I don't think there's a refutation to bishop b6. The a b6 rook c8 line is super simple. I don't think we could get that wrong. So I think bishop b6 works, and I think queen a6 is probably also good. And it was, you know, maybe a tough choice. Queen c6 played rook d1. Check. I mean, I think Fabi's completely winning here. So the question we don't know is exactly how he was planning to win the endgame. Because queen c4 check, Fabi in a must-win situation, this is the move where it's not as obvious to me how he wins this, right? Like we had b3, check. Here, you guys had found correctly, I think. Rook here, here. You know, rook backs up. Here, here, here. And we only won one pawn. Bishop b6, there is an intermezzo. I'm not going to get mad at anybody. But it's very tricky. Liart is saying something in the rook b7 line still with queen c5. Takes, king c7. The rook has to retreat down the d file and then bishop e6. Oh, man. I would want to play bishop takes e7 here. But then bishop e6 still wins, doesn't it? So we have to retreat down the file. I think you're right. Then bishop e6, and if king a3, rook b3, so king b1, white is stuck with the rook on a1, and that's compensation. It's only one pawn. That does look still a bit hard to win, Liart. Yeah. I mean, white has rook a3 and e3. Both. So white can get all the pieces into the game pretty decently. E7 is hanging, so black's going to play rook d8 or bishop f8. White's certainly still better. Black is just trying to get just trying to draw down a pawn. I would say basically for nothing, but it's not totally clear. You know, an extra pawn is not a guaranteed win. So maybe that was a critical piece of the variation as well. The h6 bishop is vestigial, Hako. Bishop takes b6, rook c4. Vinicius has another line for us. Which we hadn't yet looked at. Rook c4. I think the answer is king a3. But that's a good question, Vinicius. I think the answer is the king comes up here to defend himself from this thing. It is an awkward looking moment in that it's useless. Rook takes a4, queen takes a4, a takes b6. Oh man, what a sick tactic, master. And I want to do something weird here where I win because there's a rook on a1 at the end anyway, you know? But no, I think you got me. I think you got me. Yeah, I think you got me. So this refutes bishop takes b6. Well, what if I have some other move after rook c4 instead of king a3? How do you watch multiple streams at once? There seem to be multiple people doing this. Do we talk so slowly that you can listen to multiple voices at once and it doesn't overlap and blend together in a confusing way? Did Leko say this move refutes bishop b6? Rook d4 backwards. Yeah, rook d4. See, there's another move for us. It does allow bishop e6, which is a little scary. Yeah, I've tried practicing it, Cartier. I've tried listening to two things at once with, you know, full effort, and I can't really do it. I didn't try really hard. But I did make, you know, a first effort. Master Toaster says rook takes d4 first was better. Rook takes d4, bishop takes, bishop e6 is mate. Yeah. King a3, rook takes d4 would have amounted to the same thing, I think, basically. Yeah. So bishop takes b6 might have been losing? Holy moly. Holy moly. And either Leko found that or he's got a computer engine running which found it for him. Okay. Fair enough. If you want to know everything, now you know everything. Okay. King a3. So what is white threatening here? Nothing special. They're just saying that black can't move, right? I suppose they could make black move even less if they double rooks on the 8th rank, maybe. Or maybe play rook c1 and trade off one black piece. Queen e6. Here he chose to play rook d1, not rook c1, right? Which suggests that his plan isn't rook c1. The eval bar. Yeah, that's more fun to use the eval bar. But still, even with an eval bar, like if b6 is played and you try bishop takes b6 and the eval bar flashes -10, I mean, now you're doing a little exercise for yourself, but you already kind of, you're not searching anymore. Is rook d6 going to be any good? And then pawn takes. And if the rook moves d7, holy moly. That's a crazy idea, Cartier. Is rook d6 any good? They're at move 20 with 14 and 17 moves left. Let's check over Magnus and Abdusattorov, who caught up with them on moves. They actually got ahead. a4. Giving up the b3 square feels slightly wrong. Stops b3 for good now. Yeah, giving up. Wait, on the other board it doesn't do that. Only on the Magnus board. Only the Magnus board wobbles like that. Is it just because Abdusattorov's name is longer than anybody else's? And it changes the whole chess.com UI? So, a4, giving up the b3 square. It seems like Magnus could never lose now, right? Almost never lose? It'd be very hard to win, though. It would be very hard to win this now, right? Your bishop on g7 is kind of held at bay. Your extra pawn is this d5 pawn that can't advance. He makes the trade. And prepares rook b8, just taking a rook off the board. White can play rook b2 or rook c2. One rook comes to b8. One rook trades. Check. King to a7 or c7, holding the file. Then slowly bring the other rook to the b file to trade it. And try to grind out the bishop endgame, where you've got the plan of bringing your king to e6 to win the e5 pawn. Yeah, I guess I can envision a winning plan. h4. Doing Lord knows what. I guess looking for counterplay on the king side. So Abdusattorov senses danger, feels he needs to do something. Magnus gives him the b5 square. He doubles. Black can double now, I think, because you can't take a5. Just takes it. Oh, and kicks him out? No, bishop d7, rook d5. Locks up the other side of the board. Brings the bishop around. And agrees to a draw. I assume black's winning this endgame, honestly. Given that there's this plan of bringing your king to e6, it seems black should always win this endgame. Why didn't Magnus just double rooks, though, at this point? Rook a, b8, rook c5, I guess? And then... If you go to d7, white trades and takes the a pawn. So you need your king to recapture here. Now... Oh, and now here wins the a pawn anyway. That's why. That's why. Haha! Okay. So it's not that easy. So he's right to trade it. Now, bishop d7, rook d5, bishop a4 is a mess. Rook b8, rook a5, rook b2, king f1. Is an interesting question. Oh, this keeps the bishop out. When I looked at this from a long way away, I was thinking like rook a7 and counterplay and a mess, but rook takes d5, stopping bishop e5, and it's a draw. Yeah. Seems correct up to here. And now he just moved back and forth instead of winning. But he's winning, right? There must be some way. So bishop d7, e6 would get the rook out, but then we can never attack that e-pawn with our king. That's a lot to give up. I suppose if there were like a super easy way to just stroll to the win, Magnus would have probably played it if it were super easy. You know, like if it was just bada bing, bada boom. Let's keep our eyes on the live game. By the way, that means Magnus is through to the final. Rook c6, a5, g5. I don't feel like white wants to play a takes b6, a takes b6, do they? I don't know if Fabi yet has his plan for winning this. G5. He wants to put the pawn on a6. Gotcha. So he wants to like back up the queen at some point in a threatening way. And then put the pawn on a6 and then claim that black's totally dead. Rook 1d7, black has queen takes rook. And then after rook takes queen, bishop takes a6. Is somebody better here? We assume white is better, Resonant Spectre, because black's rook on a8 is in very bad shape. But figuring out how to proceed for white is tricky. They've got 19 moves to play in 10 and 14 minutes respectively. No increment till they get till move 40. Then they'll get an extra 30 minutes plus the 30-second increment. And yeah, we also have a game going on between Kamer and Gukesh over there, which we haven't updated in a while, but I've been trying to figure this out. So a very rare draw here in the Magnus game, but I feel like he's just winning. If he were just winning, I would see how. Hey, Tapas New. Welcome. And thank you for joining us. Difficult games today. Difficult games today. Could you win this endgame if you put your pawn on e6 and then played rook b8 and traded rooks? I think not. Yeah. This game's over, DL Borger. They agree to draw. Liart says the only winning plan consists of pushing e6. I think once you've played e6, it's a draw. Because bishop d7, bishop d1, right? And, you know, e6, king c7, rook b1, rook b8, trade everything. You just don't have a winning plan if you can't attack e5 anymore. You're attacking the a pawn with one bishop, they defend it. E pawn with one bishop, they defend it. Nothing more to do. d4 doesn't do anything, so there's no plans. You can put your rook not on the b file, like over on the f file, but there's no penetration point. You could go for rook f5, I guess. Is it time to get the kids yet? No, I still have 20 minutes. Yeah, Master Toaster, you'd have to first play like bishop d7, e6, king c7, evict their rook, then go rook f8 to f5. But once you've done that, when you go rook f8, white can go rook f1 or rook f2 or whatever, right? So like bishop d7, bishop d1, e6, you know, some waiting move. Oh, I see a little bit of a plan now, actually. Okay, so I'm going to try and stop my own plan. If I went to b2, which was undefended, I would go here, rook f2, and then I would go rook back to b8, you see? Oh, wait, I can still do it. Rook b1, I trade and take a4. So I was able to do something here. Oh, God. So I could go rook b2 with absolute mayhem. Or I could go bishop f8 with the idea of bishop a3 as well. And avoid mayhem. And that looks completely winning for black. Huh. So maybe Liart is right that we can win with e6. But what if white waited here? And only once we go rook f5 played rook f1. Well, that would just mean they just need a waiting move. There's also the move rook f3 at some point, right? Rook e5 is interesting, but there is rook f7 in response. And then I think black loses, right? That bishop gets trapped by white's rook. That's funny. Well, white can't take on f5 because ef5 wins, because black gets e6 again for the king. So we could start coming around the mountain. We can eventually go bishop f8 to a3. Yeah, I think having this bishop a3 idea is definitely a nice extra point. Can't do it here because of check. So yeah, let's do this. But if white sits around, we can go bishop f8, bishop a3, bishop b2. It's so hard. It's so hard. Or G7, maybe. Looks like white gets a queen here. Very, very hard to figure out. Okay, very hard. So he just took the draw. Just took the draw. Is this game still going? No, this game was drawn. Okay, targeted the h3 pawn, but he can play h4 here, right? And now the advantage is mostly gone. D3. Yeah, he tried. He sure tried. This is like the closest it gets to the breaking point for Alireza. And here he would have to try knight a2, knight c5, I think. But it's probably not quite enough. Here takes there, king g5. I'm gonna go here. No. Doesn't matter. And king g3, king e4. If the king ever comes here, there's knight check. So there's just no way to make progress. Okay, so that was a real draw. And Ding played really well, but not quite enough to break Firouzja down, and he had the lead from yesterday, so he wins the match, but Ding gave him a little bit of a scare and showed some strength today. Back to Fabi. Levon at 0 minutes, it's showing me. Rook e8, takes, rook c4, queen b5, live position. So he's looking like he's going to lodge in that a6 pawn, like somebody said. A takes b6 looks crushing, except a takes b6 is check for anybody who's new to this position. So it's very hard to beat black with a takes b6 when the white king is stuck on the a file. King c7, preparing to maybe get that rook out at some point here. Super complicated is rook takes c8 here. He's played a move. It was rook to d6. Woo la la. That move looks less complicated than rook c8. He's got to take with the pawn. Ah, is he going? Wait. Is he bishop b6 now? Yeah, he's got bishop b6 now, I think. He's thinking. So bishop b6, pawn takes, queen takes, king d7, queen d8, king c6, rook takes e6, and then if the bishop takes on e6, he's got queen a8. So bishop b6, pawn takes, queen takes, king there, queen d8, king c6, rook takes queen. At that point, black only has rook and bishop against the queen. The queen's defending rook a5 check, which is probably what black would play there. Rook a5, queen a5, bishop takes e6. But it just doesn't look like it's going to be enough. He's played it. Bishop b6. Just going to play the next move quickly. He can repeat here with queen b5. But he's got 10 minutes and his opponent has 10 seconds, so I don't see a huge value in queen b5 repetition right here. He goes for it, checks him, takes it. Levon literally has less than a second per move, if the clocks are accurate. Plays bishop f8. With the idea of queen f8, rook a5. Rook d6 comes in, just demolishing everything. At some point here, he's got a flag. There's queen b6, mate in one next move. Maybe he could play his king before flagging. And he won. Levon had just enough time to resign before mate in one. Brutal. Brutal. That was a nice quality game from Fabi, no? High quality, I think. Tons of moves that us mortals would not have found. Good strategy. Good development, good calculation, good tactics. Seems like a very, very good game. Right? Like Levon was being tricky here with this c5 sack. But Fabi just says, yeah, just take back on c2 and my pieces are better. Anyway. Here, calculating bishop b6 doesn't work. Took some restraint and some good calculation. And this a5 idea against the rook on a8, I would have never, another move I would have not gotten right. I would have probably miscalculated, played bishop takes b6 and lost here. I would have probably actually lost as white and gone for bishop takes b6. That's an important thing you have to understand, folks. When you watch a game and you get to like suggest an idea and then take it back and, you know, check an evaluation on a computer or listen to a comment or something like that, like you can forget like what would really happen if you were playing a game. Like I would probably have missed one of black's defenses to bishop b6, played it and lost. Liart would have Liart, for all of being a master, would have played rook d2, queen takes c5 here, etc. You know, there's so many different spots where each of us could have lost. I could have lost this game a million times over. You know, and why not rook c1 here? The move I would have wanted to play, but I didn't even have enough time to think about what I would have done. You know, and a5, I would have never thought of it. g5, I would have freaked out and done something, who knows what. Didn't even have a candidate move. Maybe just flagged, you know. Oh. Exactly, Hako. That's what makes it so great, is like Fabi has to play this at a level where he has to be so precise, not miss anything, not allow anything. Levon is super, super tricky. Super, super tricky. Oh, man. It's... Oh. Yeah. Nice. Really nice. Fantastic. One game, perhaps still going. Let's just jump the game to the live position, folks. They're at move 35. Gukesh is in a must-win situation here. At first glance, he's up an exchange. 5 minutes against 1 with no increment here and 5 moves to make for time control. Oh, thanks, Abdul. We'll give it like 5 more minutes. Just enough time to make time control for these two. So if knight to c7, he's got rook c5 check, not winning the knight, but the rook. So he can't take on c7, and he's resigned. It's just over. See, I had time to check this out before leaving. Knight f4, rook c5 would also win the rook. Any knight move would lose the rook. Yeah, it was over. King c4, c6, etc. So Gukesh wins with black, and that's going to give you guys 2 tiebreakers to watch without me today. Tamer versus Gukesh. And very exciting, Fabi versus Aronian. Both players on form. Did we get a chance to look at their game from yesterday before we looked at this? Yeah, I'm streaming the next 2 rounds, Abdul. Okay, semifinals. Oh no, we haven't looked at this Levon game from yesterday. Black's trying to get f4 for the knight. Throws in the bishop pair. Struggling to get those space for those queenside pieces. It's not obvious. Black looks okay. Doesn't want to trade off all the rooks on the C file. Wow. Aronian finding room despite the bad bishop. Yeah, agreed, Richie. Fabi's playing super strong. So he just grabs more space. He can't quite crack the dark square, so he can't open the king side fully. Hits d6, takes the file, doesn't go for rook c4, winning a pawn. Still doesn't take the pawn. Locks in the back rank. Oh, now we can't take the pawn. It's too late. Oh my god. The knight, yeah, the knight's not looking good. Oof. Dang. Still equal material. He's like just barely holding his king together. Oh, there comes a pass pawn for black. Gets behind the passer. Man, that bishop's doing a pretty good job of protecting its king. Wow. And queen trade. H3, D7, H2, queens, queens, queen G8, checkmate. That was an impressive game as well. So, yeah, so it's really awesome and intense here at this GOAT challenge. White played with an extra piece most of the game, although it was not easy. I guess so. I guess so. Man. I don't have time to look at anything super interesting and instructive right now, Richie, because I have to go get the kids. Oh, sorry, Hako. I have to go. I have to go. But the tournament delivers once again. The tournament delivers once again. So much fun. So cool. So exciting. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, wherever you are. Yeah, we both fab. That was a tough game for me. I'm sure I played okay because I was on form that week. My opponent just played better. All right. Cheers, everybody. Be good. Let's send a raid over to Chess 24.